the Commission meeting this evening. We have some of our presenters online. On item 6, Superintendent Helen Kenny. Hello Helen and welcome. And Alison Amira, who we know. Hello Alison, welcome.
Hello there.
Hi. So we'll start with apologies for absence. The only one I've actually had is Tony Virgo this evening. I don't know whether anybody else brings any apologies.
My understanding was that Councillor Mossam may be arriving to the meeting late, but I'm expecting him to be joining us online, so I will keep an eye out for him participating remotely.
Okay, fine. Do you
I'm here.
Oh, I
it?
didn't catch you. Apologies, Councillor.
Do you want a roll call first?
So I was just going to say, as I can see the members that are sat in front of me in the room, we will stick with the new protocol of just doing a roll call for those that are joining online. So if you wouldn't mind turning on your microphone and confirming that you're present when I call your name. Firstly, the members of the Commission. So Councillor McLean.
Present.
Councillor Mossam.
Present.
And Councillor Porter.
Present.
Thank you. I also understand that we have in attendance Councillor Birch.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Hayes.
Present.
And Councillor Harrison.
Present.
Are there any other members present online whose names I haven't called? I'll take that as a no, but if please notify me if you spot somebody, please. Thank you.
Item 1, I think we've done. Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I just refer members as well? There was an email there was a number of follow-ups from those minutes, and I hope you all received the email with the detailed answers to the outstanding questions. But we'll go through. So page 3 on item 2, if there is any questions, further questions, or indeed on the answers that were given. Page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. No. Okay, then are there any objections to accepting those minutes by the Commission? No? Then we'll take those as accepted. Thank you. Item 3, the declarations of interest. I'm sure we're all familiar with the words now, so... Yes, of course, Mike.
I'm not sure if I had to declare an interest for this one. I'm looking at Jill. For the SEN.
The send, I don't think so, because you're
Okay.
not specifically mentioned.
Right.
So item 3, any declarations? No. Okay. Item 4, urgent items of business. I'm not aware of any.
No, Chair, I'm not been notified of any.
Item 5, public participation.
Again, I'm not aware of any submissions by members of the public.
Okay. And therefore we come to the item on community safety, sitting as the Crime and Disorder Committee for item 6. The presenters that have been invited are all on Teams. So that is Councillor Harrison, Superintendent Helen Kenny, and Alison Amira. Okay, team, who wants to go first and lead us in?
I'll go first, Councillor. Thank you. I'm just going to share the presentation, so just bear with me a minute. Okay. Is that visible to everybody on the screen?
Yes, we can see that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Kirsty. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for your attendance tonight. It's our pleasure to present the CSP's annual progress report to you all this evening. So our presentation this evening will do a few things. It's going to share data on the crime and disorder profile in Bracknell Forest and the context of that in the wider Thames Valley and also England and Wales. It's going to also demonstrate our progress against our CSP priorities, and it will also provide some recent examples of successful joint working to bring alive the operational work that we do as our day-to-day. This section is helpful for the background, context and priorities of the CSP. So we've included it in the pack for information. There's quite a few slides, but I'm not going to go through all of them because a lot of it is unchanged from last year and there just isn't the time to go through all this evening. But I did want to highlight slide 15, however. So if we just go across to that slide, it names a few resources that we have recently been working on. So the CSP is often asked about the difference between the CSP and the Council's Community Safety Service and how both interface with the police and the Police and Crime Commissioner. So we thought it would be useful to prepare an FAQ which answers those questions and other questions that arise from time to time. We've also prepared an FAQ on antisocial behaviour, or ASB, as it covers a wide range of issues, all differing in threats, harm and risk. And because of that, the lead agency may differ depending on which one has the powers and expertise to tackle it. So it might be the Community Safety Service that leads, it could be police, housing provider, or the Public Protection Partnership. So the FAQ explains all of this and we hope it will be useful. And then thirdly, we thought it would be useful to put together an infographic on how to report to police and Crime Stoppers. And it may sound obvious, but there are a number of different ways to do it, depending on how urgent the situation is and also whether the reporter would like to remain anonymous. So all three documents, I've just put a screenshot of all three on there just to show you what they look like, but all three documents are going to be shared as part of the notes of this meeting. So if we go across now to section 2, which is reported crime and antisocial behaviour from the 1st of August last year to the 31st of July this year. And I'll now hand over to Helen to take us through the slides of this section. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Alison, if we could go to the first slide, which is the crime survey. Lovely, thank you. So this slide talks about the crime survey. So this is the crime survey for England and Wales, and it's hugely important as it's a means for us to really understand the true level of crime. The crucial value of the survey is its ability to find out about crimes that aren't necessarily reported to and therefore not recorded by police. Previously, this survey has shown that only 4 in 10 crimes are actually ever reported to the police. So conducting the survey is incredibly valuable in terms of understanding all those crimes that go unreported and actually understanding the real crime that's occurring. So you will see on the slide there that pattern shows a real positive trend of crime since the mid-80s continuing to fall across England and Wales. You will see sort of a break in that data. So in March 2020, as a result of COVID, that crime survey was a telephone operated crime survey for England and Wales. So that replaced that face-to-face interviewing. Which meant that some of the data is experimental statistics, still in the testing phase. So they're not fully developed. So that's why you'll see a gap in that slide there. But overall, you can see a real positive trend. And actually post-COVID, you can see that trend is continuing to decrease when we look at the estimated crime, especially with crime excluding fraud and computer misuse there. Next slide, Alison, please. So this slide shows the data for individual unitary authorities. So across the bottom, you'll see the named authorities, and the figure at the side represents those crimes per 1,000 population. So this data is 12 months worth of data taken up to the end of March 22. So for me, this is a really useful representation of the low crime figures that we continue to see in Bracknell Forest. So you can see, I think, at the very left-hand side there, if you can read it, it's really small print, but you'll see it's the Isles of Scilly are the lowest, whilst at the other end of the spectrum, you've got Middlesbrough, which is the highest. So Bracknell is there in the purple, showing that we're 9th out of 59 authorities, which I'm sure you'll agree is a really, really positive position to be in. And for me, one that should give our communities some real reassurance about their safety as residents of Bracknell Forest. Next slide, please, Alison. So this slide, we go in to talk about MSGs, or most similar groups. So most similar groups are groups of police force areas that have been found to be the most similar to each other based on analysis of demographics, so social and economic characteristics, which all would relate to our crime levels. So all local authorities, I think with the exception of the City of London Police, have a group of similar force areas, which they're just described as most similar. So again, these crimes on here are crimes per 1,000 population. And as you can see here, Bracknell Forest is positioned as 4th lowest in our most similar group. For comparison, on the very left, I don't think it's actually mentioned in the slide, but we've got North Herefordshire is one of the lowest, and then at the far right in our MSG, we've got Maidstone in Kent as the highest. Some crime trends for us across the whole of Thames Valley Police. So 2021 to 21-22, TVP as a whole shared some reassuring figures for crimes. So residential burglary, so that's burglaries to houses. We saw a significant decrease of 40%. That's over a 5-year average. And we saw a 23% reduction in personal robbery offences over those time periods as well. Next slide, please, Alison. So in this slide, we look a bit more at serious violence. So here we look at the whole Thames Valley area. So this graph details our rates of serious violence in 2021 and how we compare to other CSPs right across the Thames Valley. So the data obtained from the Thames Valley VRU, or sorry, Violent Reduction Unit, details our serious violence. So when we talk about serious violence, what we look at is the following definitions, which is a person aged 25 years or younger in possession of a knife. We look at any incident of violence, burglary, robbery, sexual offence, or indeed public order offence in which we can link a weapon. That can be a weapon used, a weapon threatened, or even just the mention of a weapon. We also look at more serious assaults of GBH, so grievous bodily harm, even offence levels or more serious. And we also include in that offences from people committed by people who are 25 years or under, who commit the more serious drug offences, so possession with intent to supply or concerned in the supply of drug offences. As you'd expect from this slide, I don't think it's any surprise that some of our large urban areas have by far the highest rates of serious crime, and our rural areas have the lowest. So Bracknell sits in there quite positively, just slightly above those rural police areas. Thanks, Alison. Next slide. So this slide here, we look at our violence figures. So in particular, we look at our violence against the person statistics in comparison to previous years. So our violence with injury incorporates every single offence where an injury is recorded. Now, just to add a bit of context to that, this can include assaults, but can even include crimes like dog bites, where a person's bitten by a dog where we deem it to be not in proper control. So it doesn't necessarily have to be person on person type assaults, although the majority are. Injury in the injury statistics can be anything from a very slight reddening of the skin, so that's classed as an injury, all the way across to the most serious and significant life-changing injuries. So a real broad spectrum there. Again, violence without injury, so that includes assaults where the force was not significant enough to leave any sort of a mark. So you might be looking at assaults where maybe you've had a push or a shove. And it also includes assaults where there was actually no contact made. So an assault whereby a victim might have been fearful, that they were going to be assaulted or violence was going to be used against them, but it never was. So assaults also without injury will include those statistics as well. So it's quite important to understand, obviously, the context of the type of crimes behind these figures, to understand why we've seen these changes and trends. So, for example, Bracknell in particular has seen a significant rise in reported offences from a local secure hospital, and that's as a result of some changes in our partnership practices, where we're encouraging more reporting and also streamlining some of our processes as well. But importantly for me, it's really worthy to note that in our last HMIC Peel inspection for 2020 to 2021, we were graded as good for our crime data integrity, and that's all about how we record our crime. So it's been a real area of focus for us as a force to improve that and really get that right. So what we will see, and this is probably why it explains why it's not just Bracknell that's had that increased trend, but actually it's a trend that we've seen apparent across the whole of Thames Valley. So in the past, we may have got a call, for example, from a neighbour who was reporting a problem with another neighbour, for example. It would have been recorded as an ASB type neighbourhood dispute, really quite low level, where somebody, would have just complained maybe about an ongoing parking issue. Now that sort of issue has to be recorded as a harassment, which comes under our umbrella of violent offences. Sometimes we will go out and we'll debrief a caller, have a chat with them. We'll then speak to the other neighbour who will make a counter allegation, and then we'll get another report of harassment we have to record. So actually the intervention that we do is exactly the same, but whereas at one time we would have just recorded that as an ASB neighbourhood dispute, it's now recorded as two separate violent offences, albeit it is still the exact same circumstances. Another example of that would be, say, in a domestic violence situation, where we might attend an incident whereby there might have been no actual offence committed, but perhaps there's been an argument between two partners or two family members. And what we do when we attend a domestic situation is we sit down and we do a really detailed risk assessment, and we ask lots and lots of questions about the history to really understand the risk. And while we're asking questions about the history, it could be that a victim may report often 2, 3, 4, several historic offences that perhaps may be way beyond their STLs or their statutory time limits for prosecution, but we now have to record all those historic offences as well. So we can go to one particular incident, and out of that can be recording a current incident and maybe lots of historic ones as well. So I think that gives a bit of a sense of why sometimes our crime figures tend to increase in terms of our recording, but we don't always see the increase in actual crimes when we do things like the crime survey that gives us that overall picture of where we are nationally in terms of crime as well. Next slide, please, Alison. So in this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about knife crime, and I'm going to touch on some of the knife crime work we're doing at Bracknell at the moment. So this slide relates specifically to knife crime, but not possession offences. So they're not offences where somebody's found in possession of a knife. It all relates to knife-enabled offences. So this is where a knife is either used, seen or mentioned in commission of an offence, and it includes knives and blades and sharply pointed articles as well. Again, these vary in their seriousness or severity, so these can include everything from an argument in a school, for example, whereby a pupil may have had an argument with another pupil and they've made a threat that they're going to hurt them with a knife after school, for example. Nothing ever happens, there is no sort of following on incident, but at the time a knife is mentioned, so that's recorded as a knife crime incident. And this, that's obviously a very low level, and this goes right through to offences where actually a knife is used in the commission of the offence. So we have seen an increase in these, but I have to stress that the numbers are really low. So an 8% increase, what that actually amounts to is 3 additional offences. So thankfully, knife crime is really quite low in Bracknell. I think in part that can be attributed to the amount of preventative work that we do to keep the numbers so low. So in Bracknell, we have Operation Kosher, which is our long-term operation to tackle knife crime. So we work in partnership with the VRU. Our approach is one of prevention as much as pursue as well. So in terms of our investigations, we have additional scrutiny around all knife crime investigations to make sure that they're investigated robustly and as expeditiously as possible as well, to make sure that we have the right level of supervision into those offences and that our outcomes or detections are appropriate as well. We also use intelligence to target our habitual knife crime carriers, and we carry out proactive operations where there's risk. We've got a long-term youth project to deliver knife crime awareness in schools, for example. So knife crime, although it is very low in Bracknell, it continues to be one of our top 3 priorities for our police area, because I think it's that long-term preventative work that makes sure that our knife crime numbers remain as low as they do. Next slide, please, Alison. So we go on here to talk about domestic violence. So here we've seen an increase in our outcomes or detection rates for domestic violence. They've gone up from 12% to 15%, and maintain higher than the Thames Valley Police average. When I talk about an outcome, I mean a positive disposal for an investigation. So that can include court disposals or out of court disposals as well. So we're committed to obviously continuing to improve our investigations and outcomes for, our most vulnerable victims in this case. I think when you look at that, you may think actually an outcome rate of 15% may seem really low, when in actual fact, we know the perpetrator, so we know the suspect, they're clearly named because, the victim knows them. So you would think in comparison to some other offences, maybe we would see a much higher detection rate, but we know that domestic violence can be really challenging to prosecute. Some of this can be as a result of victims not wanting to support the prosecutions. We know it's a crime type where victims find it really hard to support police action against their partners or family members. So in circumstances, obviously where it's appropriate, we're taking really robust action to bring those perpetrators to justice, even without the support of the victims in some evidence-led prosecutions. We touch on this slide about DVPNs or domestic violence protection notices, and I think Alison's going to talk about those a little bit further into the presentation. But we do recognise that supporting victims of domestic violence is about so much more than getting a prosecution in court. In fact, when a victim rings police on, 999 for help, going to court and a prosecution is, quite understandably probably the last thing on their mind. So it's much more about ensuring victims have the right support to move forward. And domestic violence protection orders are a really good way of doing this. And that's where police can apply to the court for a 28-day order even, to prevent a domestic violence perpetrator from doing a series of things, including going to that victim's house, contacting them and such like. And that just gives that really important breathing space for the victim to go on, seek some support, and, for example, get, other civil orders such as a non-molestation order. Next slide, please, Alison. So in this slide, we look a little bit at sexual offences. So the data in this relates to the last 6 months. When looking at these figures, we really do have to take into context the low volume of offences recorded and detected. So these numbers actually are really, really hard to interpret because the numbers are so low. We're talking about 3 outcomes in comparison to 1 over the previous time period compared. So they are really low. We are obviously committed to focusing on rape and serious sexual assault across the whole of TVP, but it is a priority for this local area as well. Interestingly, on the 26th of September, a whole new team of detectives were established, and this team is just dedicated to improving outcomes for survivors of rape and serious sexual offences. The team don't actually do the investigations themselves. They're there as a supportive function, but they'll be striving to ensure that our investigations locally are exhausting all lines of inquiries, maximising all legislative opportunities, making sure that we're making best use of national practice from other forces, which obviously all, contributes to that wider VORG strategy. So the team will also work across the whole force area. They look to help us progress investigations, offer bespoke advice around individual circumstances, and they actually work really closely with the CPS as well on some of the most complex cases, and they also offer additional training to staff as well. So that team is led by a detective superintendent, supported by a detective inspector and I think 3 detective sergeants and 3 detective constables. So all of whom are really experienced in rape investigations. So I think that's a really positive and actually shows just the importance that we're putting on improving our investigations in those areas. Next slide, Alison, thank you. So I just want to touch a little bit on unauthorised encampments, and that's just given some of the new legislation we've got to use now. So this, the Police Crime and Sentencing and Courts Act of 22 has amended the legislation to increase certain powers when it comes to dealing with unauthorised encampments. So it came into force in June. And as I say, amends our legislation, granting us additional powers to seize property, which includes vehicles, where individuals are residing or intend to reside on land. The offence is committed if a person who resides or intends to reside with a vehicle fails to leave the land or remove their property without reasonable excuse when asked to do so. And importantly, it's when they have caused or are likely to cause significant damage, disruption or distress. So that maximum penalty for that will be 3 months imprisonment or a fine of up to £2,500. It's really important that we know the wording in this legislation. So in relation to the power, you know, as with anything else, police must be proportionate in any action that they take, and the action we take must be necessary as well. In that wording, we see the word significant. And it's really important that that unauthorised encampment must have caused or is likely to cause significant damage, disruption or distress. So an example of that, just to give a bit of context, would be something like an encampment that sets up on a school premise that would maybe stop the school from opening, the disruption it would cause to pupils, staff, to parents. So not just affecting the children's education, but perhaps their welfare too. Imagine, you know, children going without their free school meals. So that's kind of a really good example of where we saw significant disruption or distress, and police would certainly use their powers. Now, if you compare that to maybe an encampment that's set up on a field where actually there's no offences being committed, there's no pre-planned events on the field, so there's no actual events being disrupted. So really, you can't say there's any real distress to the community. So that's kind of like the other end of the spectrum where we probably wouldn't use our police powers in this case. Of note for Bracknell, we've had 4 unauthorised encampments since the start of the year, and that's compared to 15 in Wokingham, which is the same police area. And out of those 4, we've only needed to use our new powers on 1 occasion, and that was quite recently, an encampment in Sandhurst. I think that's it, Alison, for my side, so I'll hand back to you, but obviously we'll be taking some questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. So the next few slides will share progress made with the 22-23 key focus areas. So the first key focus for the CSP is to tackle exploitation and serious violence across all ages. So children at risk of exploitation are overseen by the Council's very well established Make Safe team. In Ofsted's recent inspection of our children's services, mention was made of effective risk management meetings and sharing of information. This year, a new triage system has also been introduced, which makes sure that every child who is screened is discussed at a multi-agency meeting. So this adds a layer of scrutiny around decision making and ensures that there is no duplication. The Council has always been proactive in safeguarding under 18s against serious violence and exploitation, but this year the CSP is addressing a gap in over 18s. Thanks to the Thames Valley Violence Reduction Unit, we now have access to data of habitual knife carriers, and we are piloting a group from this month. I think the first meeting is on the 20th of October to look at both knife carriers and those who are at risk from them. As you would expect, this will be a multi-partner initiative and the first time that this approach is being applied to this age group in Bracknell Forest. The new Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act includes a serious violence duty, which will require local partnerships, which is the CSP, to collaborate to prevent serious violence through a strategic needs assessment and a strategy. While the CSP has already worked through the draft government guidance to check our existing compliance, we are now await secondary legislation, which has been amended to include domestic abuse related serious violence, which we will then recheck and respond to. The country has shown overwhelming support for guests from the Ukraine, and we have nearly 128,000 guests that have been welcomed into the country so far. The CSP, though, is alert to the potential for some sponsors to exploit guests, and sadly, this has occurred in a few areas across the country. These case studies have very helpfully been shared together with recommendations on how to prevent those situations from occurring. And useful guidance is increasingly being developed in different languages as well, which we are sharing through our guest and sponsor networks, as well as with the practitioners working with our visitors. The CSP has also developed a prompt card for professionals on questions to ask, signs to spot, what to do and who to contact should they come across a suspected case of exploitation with our Ukrainian guests. The CSP recognises the importance of staying on top of emerging themes in exploitation. An example is child financial exploitation, which the Children's Society is saying that there is insufficient early recognition and intervention on a national scale. So as a result, we'll be exploring how we can build an awareness amongst colleagues and partners at a local level. The second key focus is to reduce town centre, ASB and crime. So the second half of last year saw a steep increase in ASB and crime in the town centre, mostly associated with a group of young people, many of whom were known to us due to difficult home environments. Preventative and diversionary activity was prioritised through a programme called Act Now, which was initiated by police in conjunction with a local youth engagement provider. So 14 of the most vulnerable children were engaged in mentoring and activities which focused on a number of different areas, including respect, decision making, and self-confidence. The children also attended coffee mornings and charity car washes as part of a community engagement project. The programme was well received and an extension of it ran into the summer holidays, and that was funded by police and the local authority. The CSP became aware that some of our neighbouring authorities were also experiencing similar patterns of ASB and crime in their town centres, and we were supported by the Police and Crime Commissioner to submit a consortium bid against the government's Safer Streets 4 fund, which we were successful with. So the project is just about to start, and it's going to comprise detached youth work, mentoring and diversion, and also the creation of safe and inclusive spaces for young people. And that will run starting this month until September 2023. Part of the work in the town centre has been ensuring that premises act within the terms of their licenses and that they work with the CSP on reducing ASB. So we've recently worked with McDonald's in recent months, which saw problem-solving work take place, which included conflict resolution training being undertaken by all managers, closing off the upper level after 7 p.m, an incident log being implemented, and also banning letters being issued. In this case, and with other cases, such as with Hollywood Bowl, the community safety team worked with police, the lexicon, the Public Protection Partnership licensing team, and the two premises to ensure a robust set of measures, which saw a reduction in demand on police and the lexicon security staff, increased confidence by premise staff to manage issues, and a much more enjoyable experience for visitors. In order to increase the capacity for the enforcement of some police powers within Bracknell Town Centre, ABM, which is the company appointed by the Lexicon to provide security services, has made an application to Thames Valley Police for a range of delegated powers under the Community Safety Accreditation Scheme, or CSAS. So there's going to be 9 powers in total, and 6 members of ABM are being trained, and we are hopeful that mid-October we'll see commencement of those powers. In recent months, the CSP's worked with police, housing, the rough sleeper team, youth services, parking management, and street cleansing on issues that we've had, including a rough sleeper who was behaving criminally, organised begging, organised busking, and also a spate of graffiti at Bracknell Walk car park. The CSP has also seen 8 fixed penalty notices be issued by police in recent months to vehicles driving across Bond Square next to Waitrose, most commonly by food delivery vehicles, and the Lexicon has been instrumental in supporting with vehicle registration numbers. The Town Centre's Partnership Problem Solving Group, or PPSG, meets monthly to resolve the more complex cases of crime and disorder, and resolved 16 such issues in 21-22. We are all very excited to hear that the deck is hopefully going to be a reality in 2024, which will bring additional leisure venues into our amazing town centre. And this is likely to mean additional footfall into our town centre. And as some of the establishments are going to be alcohol-led, we will need to ensure that we are prepared for any additional demand on our services. We started having discussions about these, and we'll be working on this in coming months. The third key focus area is reducing harm caused by domestic abuse, and there's 2 parts to this, the first being management of perpetrators and enforcement. So Bracknell Forest has 4 perpetrator-focused initiatives, which we are focusing on this year in terms of their robustness. The first is called MATAC, and it focuses on perpetrators who pose the highest risk. In 21-22, the group worked with 47 cases, and we are aiming to grow that this year through encouraging referrals. We are also monitoring the reoffending rates of the cohort. In Q1 of this year, we had 3 cases that we worked with and closed, and there were no known repeat incidents after that so far. Alongside MATAC, we have a police operation running called Operation Vocal, which focuses on perpetrators who won't consent to MATAC, but who still pose a current and repeat risk. Perpetrators and families where children are open to children's social care would be expected to attend DAPS, which is a one-to-one perpetrator program delivered by the council. We monitor reoffending levels too, and as an example, the last 4 years saw 10 perpetrators reoffend out of 87 clients that have completed the program. When an individual doesn't fit the criteria for existing services, Plain Talking can fill the gap. It's a free one-to-one support service for men and women who recognize that their behavior in their relationship is becoming problematic, and the work includes identification of trigger points, communication skills, and also conflict resolution. Helen described what DVPNs and DVPOs are, so I won't repeat that bit, but just I'll go over to who's in charge. So this is a new program which we started in autumn of 2021, and it's specifically for adolescents who are violent or abusive to their parents. This program is being partly funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner's Community Safety Fund, and to date, 22 families have accessed the program, with parents reporting less violence and fewer call-outs to the police. The second part of this key focus is to make further progress with our 3-year safe accommodation strategy. So this strategy launched 9 months ago, and we have already launched a new sanctuary scheme, which enables victims of domestic abuse and their children to remain safely in their own homes instead of having to flee to another area. We've employed a DA specialist, who's going to be based in housing, to be a single point of contact for victims ensuring effective signposting and contact with other agencies and partners. We've also retendered our domestic abuse refuge contract and set up an emergency survivor fund for furniture and other needs that may arise when fleeing abuse. We still have a lot to do to deliver against all the priorities in that strategy. We still have 2 years to do it. But as you'll see there, we've got some really big pieces of work to do, which are ambitious and challenging. But we're going to also look at working with our neighbours across the region on these incoming months. I just wanted to put a quick slide in around antisocial behaviour because antisocial behaviour is reported to police, but also to the Community Safety Service. So over the last year, we've received 234 queries. And while some are quickly resolved through signposting to the lead agency, others are far more complex and can take many months to resolve. Most of the issues that we've seen comprise drug-related concerns, noise, which could be from music, vehicles or barking dogs, and harassment. So those are the main ones that we tend to get queries about. If the lead agency is unsuccessful at resolving an antisocial behaviour query and where other partners may be able to help, the case is referred to the PPSG that I referred to earlier to jointly solve. If it's a substantial case with a number of partners involved, then we will normally form a task and finish group and dedicate our time to resolving the issue with our partners. If the complainant is still dissatisfied with the response from police or the local authority or the housing association, a community trigger or an antisocial behaviour case review request can be submitted, but this is a last resort and there are criteria to meet before it is accepted. In 2021-22, 44 complex cases of crime and antisocial behaviour were resolved by the PPSGs, with 43 the year before. And a lot of joint working, creativity and innovation is used to bring the disorder to an end. The ASBM Parks and Open Spaces Group has been running since 2020 and is another multi-partnered approach involving youth services, fire, rangers and also parish councils. This summer, we've seen an increase in arsons, which was concerning given the dry weather, but the fire service have been really great and have led on awareness raising, targeted work in schools, as well as one-to-one work with people involved in setting those fires. They've also been really proactive with water safety messages, which was appropriate with our hot summer. I'd just like to conclude tonight with 2 examples of actual cases that we've recently problem solved. And the first one was a vehicle ASB. So drivers of high performance cars were meeting in the car park of Sainsbury's and Ringmead, where they could drive their vehicles at high speed, spin tyres and do donuts late in the evening. Police, community safety and councillors were receiving a number of reports and complaints. So police patrolling in the location increased and the drivers were spoken to, but the issue didn't go away, it just continued. Police and community safety then met with Sainsbury's and had some discussions with Mighty, who is their facilities management company, about what we could possibly do to resolve their vehicle ASB. So it was agreed that Mighty would install an ANPR car parking system, which would allow 3 hours of parking up to 10 p.m. at night when the store closed, and anyone entering the car park after that time and before 7 in the morning was only permitted 15 minutes of parking. If they stayed longer than that, a fixed penalty notice would be generated. So the result of these problem-solving actions have been that the drivers no longer meet at that location, which has brought much needed relief to nearby residents. Of course, these drivers are likely to seek out an alternative venue, which may be in borough or out, so we are keeping a close eye on neighbouring locations. And the second case that I wanted to share involved a person with physical and mental health needs who was displaying challenging behaviour. He had made 3999 calls over a 4-month period, had jumped out in front of a police car to ask for a lift to the shops, was frequently shouting for help in the street, and had also used racist language in A&E. Due to his health needs, when he called 999, paramedics were required to take him to A&E to be checked over. His discharge from hospital was also delayed on each occasion due to his belief that he needed care and support. The actions involved bringing a range of partners together to support him, but importantly, having a single point of contact in place. Some partners were already involved and revisited assessments and pathways, and new partners, including the housing provider, age concern, and social prescribing, were brought in. A great deal was achieved, as you can see there, which involves supporting with food, cleaning, and property maintenance, as well as a move to supported accommodation. Engagement, while challenging at times, has improved. And interestingly, this case and others that we have come across have highlighted a gap that can occur when care and support thresholds are not met, yet where there is still a need. And this can mean that police and emergency services are having to step in to manage that escalating demand. We've now set up a working group to look at the development of a directory of resources which can be used by those emergency services in such cases. So that concludes our presentation, and I will just unshare this, and we are happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think we're all flooded with important information. Members, questions? First of all, Councillor Mattock, Mrs. Mattock.
Very much. Thank you. And my question is, and I've got something to say after that, is you've given a lot of percentages, but percentages do not give us numbers. You know, what's 25% of 50? What's 10% of 150? It doesn't give that information. I'm particularly interested in the stalking because I was involved in a case of that as victim support. And I think, you know, that was very harrowing. And there is an increase, and I, you know, wanted to know what the increase was, Helen.
Okay, no problem. So you're saying in relation to sort of crime figures, you want to know exact numbers rather than percentage increases. So an exact number of stalking offences over a time period. Is that what you're saying? Okay, perfect. So that's obviously, because that's not a pre-submitted question, that's not something I've got immediate access to. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'd be more than happy to take that away and contact you. I can share that to the group, or I can just send it to individually, but I'm more than happy to get those figures. What I would just need is a timescale. So would you be looking at the amount of figures, you know, since the start of the year, or are you more interested in how many stalking offences, for example, we've had this year and a comparison to last year? What is it that I can do?
Well, this year and last year. And the reason being, I dealt with a very famous one, which was Tracy Morgan. Her stalker, she lived locally in Crowthorne, and she went through hell. And later on, her perpetrator actually tried to murder somebody, and it was very long-standing. So that's why I'm particularly interested. Thank you.
Okay, I'd be more than happy to take that away and get some exact figures for you. No problem.
Thank you, Helen.
Councillor Mrs. Birch.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I'm on slightly one. I've got two questions, if I may. But the first one is from page 34, when you were talking about sexual violence and rape. I was a little bit confused because it said there were 26 and you said there were just 3. What was the actual figure there?
Oh, sorry. So the 26 related, I believe, to the actual offences recorded. Mm-hmm. The 3 relates to the amount of outcomes, so the actual detections.
Okay.
So 26 recorded, 3 detected.
Thank you. That's really clear. My next question is actually, I apologise for not putting this in before. First of all, I'm going to say congratulations because I was out in my ward. Yeah, your face lit up then almost, I think. I was out in my ward delivering letters in Nutley and Naseby. And while we were out there, this is just over a fortnight ago, we were busy delivering, and there was a burglary in Nutley, but we didn't realise it. We carried on going into Naseby. When we got to Naseby, there was an attempted burglary. By the time we got there, it was almost an hour later. And 4 officers were there already dealing with it. And I've got to say, you were right on the ball, asking us questions and following up things that we'd seen, because obviously been walking the whole time while this was happening. So congratulations to your team. I thought they were very, very professional and very caring. So thank you for that. But what it did highlight to me is burglaries in the area, which you showed it, they'd gone down, domestic burglaries, but I'm getting a sense that actually they've gone up in the last 6 months. And I was just going to ask you if you had any figures on that, which is a bit unfair because obviously I didn't submit the question. But in my ward at Hamworth and Birch Hill, it's been on the increase, and also where I live, Sandhurst, I've noticed that there's been some more burglaries. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Of course. So first of all, thank you for the positive feedback. It's really lovely to hear, and I'll make sure I will pass that on. So thank you. So yeah, in relation to burglaries, we have seen a trend of overall reductions, and we've had to take that over a 5-year average because obviously we had that long spell of COVID. So, you know, to compare our offences in times of COVID is really, really difficult, because if you think about COVID, we had everybody at home. Now, the majority of our burglaries would occur when residents were away from their homes.
Oh.
So to suddenly have all of our residents, you know, at home, or subsequently even now still working from home, there's far less opportunities for houses to be burgled, because we know that very, very few burglaries occur when a resident is actually inside the property. It's really quite rare. So it's really that change in circumstance that's caused our burglaries to fall. But yes, I certainly think there's been an increase, and I haven't got exact figures like you say right now, but there's been a slight increase from, you know, those COVID years where everybody was at home. Now, as people are slowly going, you know, and going back to work and sort of resuming those normal lifestyles, then yeah, there is more opportunity. What I would say, we've seen a particular trend of we would get a lot of burglaries in the past where offenders would break into a house purely to steal car keys from a high value car. Those burglaries in particular have gone down because we're seeing, you know, as technology improves, technology unfortunately improves for our offenders as well, and they've got more sophisticated ways of using, you know, laptops and equipment to steal a vehicle from a driveway without needing a key at all. So they're keyless car thefts. And of course what we see there is the car's still being stolen. It's just not crimed as a burglary anymore. It's just crimed as theft of a car, because a burglary didn't have to occur in order for them to steal the car key. So, you know, sometimes when we look at crime figures, we've got to add some real context to it. It doesn't always mean a crime is going up or down. It just means there's a very different, you know, legal way in which we would describe it and therefore record it. So that's a trend we have seen, is that increase in keyless car thefts as the burglaries have gone down.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Gibson.
No problem.
Thank you. This has come out of what you've been talking about tonight, so that's why I haven't submitted it in advance, but if you need to get back later, that's absolutely fine. When reporting on knife crimes, say if you have a burglary where a knife is used, but the CPS actually decide that they're just going to prosecute on a burglary basis, not an aggravated burglary, does that get counted as statistic as a knife, crime involving a knife, or does it just get reported as a burglary?
No, it stays recorded as a knife crime, because the knife crime was mentioned in the commission of the offence. Almost what CPS choose to charge with doesn't necessarily matter in terms of how we record it. Yeah.
As ex-CPS myself, I can understand that. And the other one mentioned earlier in your earlier answer, so partly responded. We had a spate in our ward in Hamworth of catalytic converter. I mean, there was like half a dozen, and it was the biggest sort of a crime wave in Hamworth, but obviously very distressing to those involved. In fact, my next door neighbour was one of them. That surely skews the statistics if you're looking at it, because it's a very specific crime. You were talking about context earlier. Could you tell me how you put that into context? If
So
that's
yeah,
okay
so
as a
certainly,
question.
So certainly in terms of theft of catalytic converters, it is a very, very specific type of theft from motor vehicles. So that would come under the classification of theft from motor vehicle. And yeah, we do see, unfortunately, spates where a particular area is targeted for a certain, usually a very small time period, and quite often it will be a certain type of vehicle as well that is targeted before those offenders then move on. What we do know around that crime profile of offenders is that they're certainly not local offenders. Quite often they're organised crime groups, that it's the same crime group that is committing not just offences across different TVP areas, but actually sometimes across cross-border areas as well, so sort of interforce areas. A lot of the time we do class it as organised crime. Our priority crime team, which is based here at Loddon Valley, which covers Bracknell and Wokingham offences, part of their remit is to look at organised crime, and they work really closely with other forces and do some joint operations to tackle some of those OCGs that are, yeah, certainly causing that, you know, committing that type of offence. As I say, it's just widespread. And what we find in Bracknell, as you would imagine, we'll get a small space, maybe for a week or two. We'll obviously quickly get an understanding. We'll do some preventative patrols, but those sort of offenders will have by that time moved on to a totally different area. So, you know, it really does take, it's complex investigations, and that's why it sits with our priority crime team. Does that help at all?
Yes, thank you for that answer.
Thank you. Councillor Brossard and then Councillor Mrs Templeton.
Good evening, Helen. Thank you much for the presentations. One question and really one comment. The first is to do with the subject of burglaries, if I can bring that up again. But it's not specifically with regard to statistics. If I'm correct, the Home Secretary has, I think, given the challenge to chief constables that whenever a burglary has taken place at a property, an officer will then visit. Do Thames Valley Police, looking, I suppose, widely, not just specifically Bracknell or Wokingham, but are the resources available to achieve that based on the statistics of the last 12 months' burglary figures?
Yeah, I'm really pleased to say that Thames Valley Police has always attended burglaries to residential properties. I know a lot of other forces stepped away from that and, you know, would maybe only attend if there was some, you know, sort of investigative reason or evidential opportunity. But yeah, I'm really pleased to say that Thames Valley have always attended residential burglaries and will continue to do so. So for us, it's business as usual. So I know some other forces are, you know, are going to have to go away and have a look at that announcement and how they're going to do that. But for us, it's not a challenge. It is, we do it anyway. We see the importance of it. We understand, you know, the seriousness of the offence and the impact it has on the victim. So yeah, we're doing it already. I'm really pleased to say.
Thank you for that, Helen. Really, this is a comment, and it's to do with traveller incursions. You mentioned Sandhurst, and there are a number of my colleague, Jill Birch's, well, not Sandhurst, lives in Sandhurst, shall we say, and others who have joined, obviously, virtually. I have to say the powers are very, very effective now, compared with the trauma that we had when weeks would go by trying to evict them and all the antisocial behaviour and the mess that was left behind. We had the incursion in Sandhurst, and within 24 hours they were gone. Conversely, of course, we had another incursion next door to the day centre where, because there was no breakage, because they gained access in inverted commas legally, and because they weren't causing a nuisance, we actually had to bring in the bailiffs, but they were gone within, I think, several days. But the legislation, it's taken a long time to get there, but I'm delighted because the statistics yourself, I think you quoted 16 down to 4. So clearly it's having an effect. So thank you for that.
No problem. Just to be clear on those statistics, so it was it was 4 in Bracknell, but it was 15 on the Wokingham side. So it wasn't a reduction. I was just comparing it to the 2 areas. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think that example you gave is a really good comparison of an unauthorised encampment that was in a real close vicinity, but some real differences to the impact it was having. So it was a good example of where we could use our powers, and then where really it wouldn't have been proportionate to use our powers. So I think that was a really good example. But no, really positive feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'm talking about the presentation that is the slide, which is talking about violence against the person. And all of the percentages for Bracknell were higher. But then when it got to all crime, we were lower, 9% compared to 12%. So can you explain when all the percentages right across seem to be higher, but then all crime, we were lower?
So I think that was just comparing it to where we're seeing violent offences increasing, but other offences not increasing, if that makes sense. Okay. So in the wider context of, you know, in comparing violent offences to others. Does that make sense, Mary?
Yeah, it does, yeah. And my other thing really is antisocial behaviour. For many residents, it's quite low key, but it's incredibly annoying. And when you cannot go to your shopping centre without being harassed, when there's people barging into Looking Cafe and being really aggressive, and when they're breaking into schools, and when they're throwing things off roofs and damaging the local Indian restaurant, and by throwing bricks at the workers and things, doesn't seem ever to be any result of the call that comes. And this is Great Hollands, but it's a group that are well known, and it's very frustrating that when you see the groups arrive, then you know they are going there. Well, I mean, they're not always going to cause issues, but there is a harassment fear now and an intimidation. And I know one woman was sitting on the bench. She's not bothered to report it, but they were horribly sexually aggressive to her. And she was a 36-year-old, and these are 14-year-old kids. And so, but she's not bothered to report it because what's the point? So it's this low level. I understand it's low level, but it's affecting the lives of a lot of people.
I agree. My first observation would be any sort of, you know, sexual type of harassment isn't low level, in my opinion, and absolutely has to be reported. I'd say that, you know, that's not low level. What I would say is that, you know, sometimes when we're getting calls in, you know, you've heard today what my priorities are as a local police area, and that is sexual offences and domestic offences, and it's knife crime. And for me, you know, we have got limited resources. We have to be really open and honest about that. And what am I going to prioritise when I've got a call about a knife crime or a domestic violence victim who is ringing 999 and terrified, and I've got some low-level ASB? I know what we have to prioritise in that moment, in that response. However, it is so important that people continue to report it, because just because somebody isn't available to respond then and there, it doesn't mean to say that all those reports are being collated, and that is then giving us the information and the intelligence for us to be able to do all that work that Alison mentions, where we work in partnership, and also look to where we focus our patrols and where we focus some of that long-term preventative work. So I know it's frustrating when people feel like they are reporting something to the police and maybe doing it online or ringing 101. It is frustrating, because what you really want in that moment is an officer just to turn up. But sometimes we have to base our decisions made on threat, risk and harm. We always will when we've got, you know, a limited pot of resources. But those calls are so important, because it gives us that information to be able to look at what we can do. And for example, it's not just about our response teams. We've got neighbourhood teams, we've got tasking teams who work together and pull together, you know, particular operations. They will use volume of calls and risk to decide where we're going to focus those, you know, those operations on. So it's for that reason I just would urge you all to encourage the communities to keep reporting and look a little bit further than that immediate then and there response on the night, but what we're going to do long term, just with some of the things Alison's mentioned. Alison, you probably want to come in and answer that far more eloquently than me.
No, that was great. Just to reiterate what Helen's saying, the reporting is so crucial because I mentioned the Act Now project, which we had before the summer holidays, which was extended into the summer holidays, and that program was working directly with a group of young people who I think you probably are referring to, Mary, and we saw quite a significant reduction in their offending. So with us now coming up to half term again, and you know, Halloween and bonfire night and all of that, we want to be as prepared as possible that there isn't going to be reoffending by that group of young people. So the reporting is really crucial for us to then identify, right, we need to pick up some diversionary activity with this person or with that person, and you know, do some specific outreach with that person. So that's another way of us becoming aware of what's going on through those reports. Through the, just to also mention, the Safer Streets 4 project, that's also going to be picking up a similar approach of targeted outreach and diversionary activities. So keeping the young people busy with you know, positive activities, so that we're not seeing this antisocial behaviour in around the borough. So I think for the first time we've really got some fantastic antisocial behaviour projects running in the borough, and I'm feeling quite positive that that's going to make a difference.
I do honestly always encourage them to report, but it has to be their report. It can't be me, because they were the ones that were the victims. So yeah, okay, thank you.
Just to add as well, that how to report infographic that I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people in the community might feel a bit hesitant to ring the police. They might feel that they're wasting police time or that nothing is going to happen. But that infographic will actually show different ways that they can report, where they're not having to, you know, make a phone call and speak to someone. They can report online, and if they want to remain anonymous because they feel a bit fearful, they can also report through Crime Stoppers. So perhaps we could share that infographic around the community, just to give them the options of different ways of reporting.
Thank you. Thank you. Helen, can I just go? Yeah, come on. Okay, you ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the attending every burglary, but I'm happy that you have just confirmed that your officers already attend all burglaries. Do you respond and report back to every reported crime?
So first of all, just in clarification to the burglary, it's every burglary dwelling, so every burglary to a house that we attend. So we necessarily wouldn't attend burglaries of sheds, for example, or warehouses, or you know, non-residential, but certainly houses, which is what, you know, has been on the media recently about other forces. And so your question, is that in relation to, do we update on every crime in relation to burglaries, or every crime reported?
Every crime reported, because I think if people do not get feedback or respond, then they'll stop reporting them.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really important thing. So we try to, we certainly should. And I have to say, a lot of it just depends on what type of offence that you're reporting. So if somebody is reporting, say, a very, very low level criminal damage, let's say, so a criminal damage, it's low level, it's not been witnessed, the person telling us is saying, you know, there's no CCTV, I've spoken to my neighbours, they didn't see anything, I didn't witness it, that, you know, we can make a reasonable assumption when we take that call that there isn't any viable lines of inquiry. And so that we'll generate it, we'll properly record it, we will give a crime a number, but that victim will be told then and there that the crime's being filed, and there won't be any further investigation unless obviously it's, you know, later on linked to another offence. So sometimes the information or update is just then and there in that first phone call. You know, we're very honest about that. Any other crime that has got an active line of investigation, a victim will always be updated and updated when it's going to be filed, and no further action is going to be taken. If it's been a long protracted investigation, so where you've got maybe an officer who's attended it in person, we have something called a victim codes of contract, which we record, where we discuss at the start how often the victim's going to be updated, by what method they'd like to be updated. Now, obviously, under the Victims Code, there are some particular points within an investigation where we're duty bound to tell them. So, for example, when an arrest has been made, or when a suspect's in custody and they get bailed. So there's certain points in the investigation where we have to update about a particular event in an investigation, but quite often, in that victim contract, we will agree with the victim, for example, okay, you know, we're going to do maybe a, I don't know, protracted interrogation into someone's phone, for example, and we know it's going to take 3 months. So we might say something like, okay, we're going to touch base with you just once a month to keep you regularly updated, but realistically no more than that. So it depends on the victim, how often they want to be updated, by what means, and also what there is to update as well. But certainly there should be, victims should be updated, and also updated when a crime or investigation is filed, no matter what the outcome is. It's actually victim care is our third priority on the area, and it's really well scrutinised right across the force, not just our area, and looking to, you know, we're just looking to improve the service of the victim has throughout that journey. And I agree with your comments at the start. Actually, that communication is absolutely key for a lot of victims. You know, we're always focused towards an investigation and getting an outcome and getting justice. Well, actually, our victim, they just want to know quite often that they've been listened to, that we've investigated as best we can, and we've kept them up to date. You know, sometimes the other side of it that is not as important to our victims. So for me, it's all about just making sure we get that best level of service to the victim. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. A few of my colleagues have already mentioned this, and this is about using percentages, because some percentages looking at that are very scary, but it might just be one crime, for example, more.
So true.
So it would be nice to have raw figures to accompany those percentages. I was also expecting to see stats on burglary, crime, drug-related crimes, vehicle crimes, and things like that as well as part of the presentation. But more important for me, I think, is to see outcomes. And that is missing in the presentation. For example, the percentage of investigations that were successful for the reported crime. And that is, I think, and also compared with other areas, because that I think is probably the best way to measure the performance of what you do within our community. Seeing the figures of how many, you know, burglaries and things that are on, you know, committed crimes doesn't help me. It tells me, yes, there's more crime, but I'm saying, well, are we solving more? And that is, I think, more of what I would like to see, and to be able to reassure residents that the police are actually doing fantastically. But that is missing tonight.
Okay, so we can certainly take that away as feedback for next time. So we can look at that wider range of crime types, look at more detailed numbers and far more detailed outcomes. We probably need significantly longer to do the presentation, I would say, and maybe we'd have to miss out some of the other parts, which we've tried to do tonight, which is talk a little bit about crime, but talk a little bit about our approach as well. But if that's the feedback, I'm sure Alison is nodding her head and writing away, so we'll definitely take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one last one. This is for Alison. the resources that you've shown us, how are they distributed?
Can I just check which slide that is, and then I'll just quickly go to it.
Yeah, it talks about the CSP, what it is and all that. It's like your
Ah,
infographic
right,
thing.
yes. Yeah. Okay, let me just find that. So is that slide 8 where it talks about the funding? Is it where is it the slide that says funding 2022-23?
Sorry, useful resources.
Oh, I see. I see. Apologies. Yes, the useful resources. So those are all three of them are quite new resources. We've just actually completed those. So they haven't really been distributed as yet, which is why I wanted to highlight them. But we will be sending those out in the notes. And more importantly, we will also be using a comms campaign to make sure that they are distributed to the community in a number of formats, hard copy and also electronically, so that they can be used.
Sorry, when you say hard format, is that just going through the door, or is that a printed magazine, or how is that?
What we will do is we will meet with our comms team and take their advice on how we can maximize visibility of those resources. So it might be in the town and country newsletter. It might be just trying to think of the other formats that they might be able to promote for us. We'll have a discussion with them and they can advise us how they can support us getting those out as far as possible. We can also give them to our partners so that they can take them with them when they do visits to residents, the fire service, the police, the public protection partnership as well. We can make them available in our community hub here at Times Square. I'm happy to take any suggestions on how you feel that might be, helpful to get out there. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Just to follow up on you, is this CSP responsible for online and or offline, online fraud in the community?
Yes, so that is a crime. So yes, scams and frauds do fall within the remit of the Community Safety Partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Helen, can I just, picking up on one of the themes that's just been raised, on one of the slides, the crimes involving a knife, excluding possession. Again, it shows Bracknell with an 8% increase, whereas the Thames Valley is 6%, but it's coming back to what does that 8%, or what is the 8% of? I mean, you say in the commentary that this is an additional 3 offences, but is that 3 offences on 100 knife crimes, or is it 3 offences on 10 knife crimes? I think it's coming back to this use of percentages, which isn't feeding us, I think, the information and numbers that might be more helpful to us when we're talking to residents.
Yeah, no, certainly we'll take that feedback on board. So I think I haven't got that presentation in front of me because Alison had shared it. So I haven't got that particular slide. So I'm just having a quick look through it just so I can clarify your particular question about there. So in the knife crime, so an 8% increase is just an additional 3 offences. So the additional 3 offences contributes an 8% increase. I think what we're trying to say there, in comparison to last year, we've only had 3 more offences. Now, I can't do the maths that quickly off the top of my head and haven't got a calculator in front of me. But yeah, it's a very small number of offences. But I again, we'll take that feedback on board, and next year we can look at sort of given exact numbers of offences and exact numbers of, increases year on year as well, if that's helpful. We'll certainly take that on board.
Well, it'll certainly be helpful, and I wonder on this particular item whether you can come back to us and drop us a line with the numbers on this knife crime 8%.
Yeah, absolutely. I've made a
when you
note
can.
of that already.
Thank you. Members, are there any other questions? Mike, sorry, I did write it down.
Yeah, just coming back to earlier conversation about successes, by which I presume we mean prosecutions. Now, I'm personally aware of one burglary in February 2020 that is going to court sometime this month, 18 months later. So how much of that would we be putting sort of in a report from you will be coming from the CPS and their prosecution? My point is that some of the roles of the police are preventative and fear of crime and related to that, which you do have control over, but you wouldn't necessarily have the same control over what's the input through magistrates and Crown Courts.
No, so it's a good question. So when we talk about outcomes, we talk about both out of court disposals and court disposals, but we talk about charges. So for us, when we talk about outcomes, we talk about a positive disposal, which is us charging somebody with that offence. It's not about actual conviction rates.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Birch, Jill.
I'd just like to say I did enjoy hearing about what you're doing at the moment and the case studies, particularly. Thank you very much for that, Alison. I think it's really important that we know what's going on, the Make Safe and all the different initiatives that you're actually doing. So please don't lose that, because I think it was really important. I know that it has meant that your presentation has been quite long, but I think it was very beneficial. So thank you very much for taking the time to let us know about all that, particularly with the town centre, what you're doing. I think it's really important that we understand that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, is it quick?
Yeah, it's quick. I just wanted to say thank you to Alison for organising a community safety event for Great Hollands residents. I think it's a fantastic thing. We had a very low response, but I think, as the year goes on, hopefully it will get better and more people will attend. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Members, are there any other burning questions?
I'd just like to say, if you send me all that information from comms, whatever you need to go out, it can go in Great Hollands Matters and things. So that gives a thing. So that will go through every door.
That's a good idea. Thank you, Councillor Temperton.
Right, thank you. I think to say thank you isn't enough with the amount of information and interest that's been shown tonight. As ever, I have to say, in previous years, it's been the same, hasn't it? Lots of questions, lots of useful information. So it just really remains to me on behalf of the Commission to thank Helen and Alison for your contribution in our education. Thank you very much for your attendance this evening.
Thank you. You're very welcome. And if there are any further questions that you think of or any general queries, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and we can support with answering any questions.
Thanks very much. Members, we need to return to sitting as the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. And we move on to item 7, which is the Education Skills and Growth Overview and Scrutiny Panel Report. Jill, this is yours.
Thank you, Chair. It gives me a great pleasure to present this. I think it's such a very important area of what we do. I think it is so far-reaching right across the borough, and I, got to thank first of all my Vice Chair, Michael Brossard, because he really has supported me, and all the people that have taken part in this. I'd like to say thank you to all the members who have spent a lot of time visiting schools, going to meetings, and I thank them for that. And before I start, I'd also like to thank the officers, because a lot of time and effort has actually been put into this, and everybody has really supported it extremely well. So I've just got to start with thank you first of all, because I think it's really key. I'm going to give you just a little background. I've got some slides, but I may not go through all of them. I don't know if you want to put the reasons. We know that nationally the number of pupils with special educational needs and disabilities has increased, and the number is 1.37 million in 2020. And of course, COVID-19, the pandemic, actually increased the attainment gaps, and locally, Bracknell and its partners underwent a SEND inspection, and we wanted to scrutinise how leaders responded to this report and the written statement of action. So I think that's really key. And the approach, you know, we were going to do this SEND report. It was actually in our 4-year plan, and we were going to start it in 2019, but for various reasons it was put back. And eventually, by the time we were starting it and we had our scoping, of course, the inspection happened. So we decided to do this review in 2 stages. Stage 1 was to scrutinise background documents, including strategies and data, review good practice nationally, carry out secret shopper exercise on the local offer, and then the stage 2, which was carry out interviews with children, young people, parents and carers, lead officers in partner organisations and school representatives. And you can see all the people that we actually had evidence from. We went to Croydon. We had lots of different people from the health come and present. Berkshire Health and Frimley National Health Service came and presented to us, and all our officers that support us in this area on the council. So if we can go straight, really, I'm going to go to, I'm not going to read out all the good practice we found because I think it will take too long, but if you see in here, we've got lots of good practice, SIAS support and lots of that, and I think that's really important to say that we did find good practice, and I think that is really key, but I'd like to sort of go through those just to say they're as read, please, and go to the recommendations. Now, the recommendations we had in 6 months, short term, medium term, 18 months, and long term, being actually 3 years, because it has to be acknowledged that some of these recommendations really will take 3 years to embed, because you're not talking about quick fixes, and some of the short term are hopefully quick fixes, but I think it has to be acknowledged that to change the culture, to change things, takes time. So the very first recommendation is ensure Bracknell Forest Council SEND team deliver on their statutory responsibilities with agreed written statement of action timescales. Embed culture change with health teams and the SEND team so better communication ensures we move away from crisis management and put the children and young people first. Now, we did originally change the first recommendation, and I wanted to make it stronger. And actually, this has actually got the culture change and the communication embedded, but I wasn't sure, and I'll be interested in the Commission's take on this, because really the communication has got better, but it still has a lot of room for improvement. So please give me feedback if you'd like that to be stronger. And the culture has changed, but I think it's got a long way to go. So the culture change and communication are within the first recommendation, which we wanted to be short term, but in fact it is taking longer. So I'll be willing to have feedback on this because I think it's really, really key. So it could be we put at the very end of this first one, you know, as a sort of thing, communication still needs great improvement, because I really think that we need to be very firm about this and say, actually, we really mean that this is a top priority, because it still at the moment isn't. So I would like the Commission's actually review to actually give me feedback on this.
Jill, if I may, the recommendation on the paper is the recommendations that's actually in the report. And if members approve that, you can't keep chopping and changing the recommendation. I mean, this is the report that's come through. If
It
suddenly
has.
you wanted to change any of the recommendations, then we would have to change this recommendation not to go to the executive,
Okay.
but to delay it so as it would come back.
Sorry, Chair, sorry. I did speak to Councillor Birch earlier just to confirm that exactly as you say, what is agreed by the Commission is what would go forward to the Executive. So I encouraged her to speak to the room to talk about whether the Commission wanted to change any wording, because as with any report that's coming forward, it's proposed by the panel, but it will be as per the wording that the Commission agrees.
I don't want to delay it, but if there are comments or changes that are made as an offer to the panel, then would it be better to delay the actual decision to send this to the executive until the next meeting? I don't want to delay it, but I'm offering it up as a thought, because once we accept this recommendation, then it's going to the executive as is.
That's very fair. And to be honest, I was just interested in people's views, because it has got better communication and it has got culture change with health teams and SEND, which we didn't originally have, because I think it's very fair to say that the National Health Service does need to have change. But and in fact, if you look at the next bit, which was, actually, I've got it here. Let me just find it. We do refer to it very clearly in key findings. So it is there, but I just wanted, just here, because it is important that we make sure that everybody is happy with it, that I just wanted to really say how passionate I am about the fact that we need this communication to be right. And we do need the fact that the culture has to change, because it has moved, but not enough. So I wanted really feedback from the Commission. We can keep it like this because we have got under key findings, which if I find them now, let me see. You know what happens? The computer.
Jo, I'm very much looking to seek your guidance, whether you want to delay it. First of all, do you want to offer the Commission?
No, I don't want to delay it.
Right, okay. Then I think we have to take the papers as is.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chairman, on a point of procedure, I don't think that you do. I think the purpose of the Commission is that if the Commission felt that they wanted to make a tweak to the recommendations going forward, that's the purpose of it coming here, is to be ratified by the Commission. So I think it'd be perfectly acceptable to make a tweak done in this setting.
I think, Jill, one thing
Sorry,
I would say about the membership is that they will have read in detail the report. So if there are any tweaks, I'm happy for you to accept the tweaks as such. But yeah, just a sec, Kevin, can I just ask Mary, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was very involved with this as well, and I totally agree with you. I mean, it does say this is 6 months, and it hasn't gone to the executive yet, so it hasn't changed. But the communication hasn't got better, really, to the established cases. I'm dealing with it daily, and this communication is really vital, absolutely vital, because lots of parents are involved here, and they want to know what is happening. It doesn't have to be resolved. They just want to be told that something is happening. And that isn't going on. So I think this is still a very, very vital part. It does say, so better, we could even put in a better essential, and it's the better, so better and the essential communication ensures we move away, something like that. So actually it puts some extra pressure, because it is the lack of communication, which we found on everybody we talked to, is the downfall. And that was in the SEND report as well.
Thank you. Can I just ask, Kevin, do you want to come in?
Yes, Chair. I just given the urgency of our improvement around the SEND work and that cohort of users and families, I think it might be done is better than being perfect. I think it's better that we actually get the recommendations to the managers and they start working on these rather than worrying about exactly getting the exact words. I think it's really important that we actually land the review and that there's an opportunity for the service to start moving forward against these really important recommendations.
Thank you. Kevin, Mike, you want to come in?
I would totally agree with what Kevin's just said, that we don't want to delay this in any format, but I don't think that's, forgive me if I'm putting words into your mouth, Councillor Birch, but if we wanted to tweak, i.e. give a greater urgency, this commission can vote on that which we put forward now, if there is any suggestive changes. But like Councillor Birch, I would not want to delay this. It's just whether we want to try and put in some extra urgency in the manner that we present it to the executive.
Dale? Dale, yes.
Oh,
come on in.
thank you, Chairman. Having heard that the Commission can amend tonight, and that would not cause any delay, perhaps if Councillor Mrs. Birch would like to suggest how the wording should change, and Chairman, you could then vote on it, because I'm a believer that the right words get the right result. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill, do you want to come back?
Thank you for that. I do think that I did suggest that we could just add a sentence about communication just on this, because we've put away from crisis management, and that is quite right in that in the first recommendation. But I think to strengthen it, if we could write just a sentence about communication, and I think. I can't remember the words I said now. Communication is essential. Yeah. The right communication is essential. But I want to do it correctly now. To make it quickly, because really it's actually responsive no, that's the wrong word.
Good communication.
Good communication
would be a prerequisite.
Yeah. Timely communication. Yeah, timely communication. Is essential. Good and timely communication is essential.
Yes.
Are you happy with that? And any other panel members?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just for formality, let's vote on that.
Can I second that, please?
Good. Thank you. Are we all in favour of that change?
Lovely.
We are.
Thank you very
Jill.
much. So I'm actually going to refer you to page 54, because what it does is it actually highlights the key findings. So, it says in the second point down, if you can see it, there was evidence of productive partnership in the past between external agencies, but this needed rebuilding after the pandemic. And a key issue was communication and poor response times for getting back to people. So we have linked it and we've shown how it needs to be. So just to reassure you that it is linked. And then also the culture of the SEND team was highlighted as an issue by parents and carers, school, post-16 and early years staff. So I think that also is there. So what we've done is, this is why I've taken a few extra minutes, I hope you don't mind, but the recommendations are linked to key findings. So that is really, it just adds weight to it and why we've actually done them. I don't think I'm going to read through all of them, because I think that I would like to take it as read. I think it is very key that we actually found that the Ofsted report we actually found absolute evidence that it was correct. So no, we didn't dispute that, and we didn't go on about what we found that was poor. We actually highlighted things that were being good, and that good practice and things that are actually moving forward. and we acknowledge that things are moving forward, and I think that's really key. And I think that that's very important, that we are on the road to this. And as I said before, that some of these are 3 years coming about, and I think that is really important. I think the website is one of them, the short term, that I think needs a lot of effort, because actually I looked at it only last week, and it hasn't got all the offerings that we've got within the borough on it still. It is out of date. And we were promised that things would be much clearer for parents and carers, so they knew what they could actually apply for and for assessments. And I think that still needs a lot of work. So that's one of our short term. And accountability was the other one. And I think that we've actually written this in all these recommendations very clearly. So I would like to recommend this to the Commission and say really it's such an important area of service that we do, and I think it's really key. Is anybody else? Dale's actually got his.
Sorry, you've moved it. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Mary? Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Should we add something to ensure that we come back and review the outcome here as part of the recommendation, to actually specifically put that there? Or am I missing? Have I missed that? As part
Mike,
of the recommendation.
I think perhaps the answer to that is that if we agree this tonight, which I hope we will, that will then go forward to the executive. If there is any rejection by the executive, then that must be fed back to us, and then you'd have the opportunity. But
no, sorry, it's not about reviewing this. It's about the outcome. So we've got 6 months and 18 months.
Yeah.
There.
Oh, the long term.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
years.
it's coming back and actually making sure in the recommendation that this, it comes back to.
It is in there.
I think that makes sense.
I think perhaps that could certainly be. I mean, the panel have done the detailed work and therefore have the detailed knowledge. Could certainly review the report. Hopefully, the acceptance by the executive as part of their panel process, so as it comes back and it is reviewed.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
No, it is actually. Oh, Michael, did you want to say?
Kevin's got his hand
Oh,
up.
no, it is actually in that we will review it in 6 months. Because that's the point. Yes, it will.
I mean, Kevin, did you want to come back again?
Yes, Chair. I was just going to say, as part of any of the reviews which have recommendations, we add it back into the work programme in consultation with the chair of when it's reasonable to go back and have a look to see whether the agreed outcomes and action points have been implemented, and if there's any additional pieces of work needed before we actually close down a review. So it is part of our process, so it doesn't need an additional point made in the report to say, but we will review it, because we always do.
No, I don't think we need it in the report, but I think the panel, the chairman, can keep an eye on it, as it were. If in fact, I think the most significant thing is whether it's accepted, firstly by the Commission, and I'm pretty sure that's going to happen, but then it's accepted by the executive, and that's the important thing at the moment. I have to say, 13 recommendations, I hope to I mean, up till now, I have to say, the quality of everything that's coming from all of the panels in terms of the report that comes before us, we approve to go to the executive, and to my knowledge, the executive have accepted all of those reports and those recommendations. I hope 13 is not going to be the one. You're listening, Dale, you want make sure it's not number 13. Mary, did you just want to come back?
Yeah, I want to second this and I'll speak to it, because this was a very, very intense and very emotional And I think it was excellent. It backs up the SEND action plan, but from the viewpoint of the members. And we did go to the schools, we did listen to a lot of parents, and some of the parents, it was a very emotional experience what they were telling us, because this is their life and they've been fighting it for a long, long time. So I think it has to be a very strong report, as it is, and every one of those recommendations was agreed and is necessary, because that is all from our experience of interviewing and getting there in the chalk face, really, of what is like to be a parent of a SEND child in our borough. And I think from the schools, from the parents, from the healthcare, everything was looked at in great depth. So it was a good report, and I really enjoyed being part of it. But I think all those recommendations are needed, because every one reflects something that was found.
Thank you for that, Mary. The recommendations, our findings showed it. We didn't obviously report everything that we saw, but I must admit I was quite emotional with some of the things I found out, because I was surprised. But I've got to say, I think everybody is on board. You can see all the evidence of all these recommendations. And I know 13, I was concerned about how many, but some of them are short term, some of them long time. Oh.
Probably have some more.
Hello?
You're first.
I'd just like to add on to the fact that we think this is important. The very nature of it is very important. I'd like to see it go to the executive as soon as possible, because it sends a message to those parents about the changing ways we're dealing with SEND in this authority. I'm sure it will go to the first available executive, but I'm just saying that I think the sooner it goes and that we tell the parents it's going is part of our strategy and communication plan.
Thank you. Dale?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to respond to your earlier comment. One of the things that members might need to be aware of is that Councillor Mrs. Birch has presented this to the executive briefing session only a couple of days ago, very passionately and very forcefully, and engendered a really strong debate and very strong support. I can't speak for how the votes go on the night at an executive meeting, but I can say that those executive members present when she gave her initial briefing were A, impressed, and B, keen to get it before them, so that, as Kevin said, those officers can get on and understand the full force that is behind the commitment and the work that the scrutiny panel has done.
Thank you, Dale. Right, I think, does anybody else wish to add anything? Otherwise, I think we'll move to the recommendation, because most of it, I think, has been said and we've got the flavour. Mike?
Thank you. I just want to commend everybody that took part in this report. I think it was very comprehensive. I knew a lot of time was spent on it and a lot of research. The reason why I brought up the review in 6 months and 18 months is that a lot of people took part. I am not talking just about members, but externally. It is so important that we feed back to them on their contribution, so that they can actually see the change happening. And that is why it is key. The review for 6 months is very key. Thank you.
Suki, did you? No. Right, members, the recommendation is before you on page 45, 2.1, with the tweak that we've all voted on to change. So can I just have your vote on the recommendation? That's unanimous. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for allowing us extra time as well.
Then we move on to item 8, which is the work programme update. Don't know whether, John, are you with us?
I'm with you, Chair. Thank
Okay,
you.
can we have your update, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to report that on the 28th of September, the integrated enforcement report went to the executive, and all the recommendations were accepted and adopted. And that our next review is looking at our strategy and policy with enforcement, and our first meeting is going to be on the 26th of October. So hopefully at the next meeting we'll be able to give you some more details of what's going on.
Thank you, John. Jill, is there any further update?
Yeah, I wasn't going to. Yes, I had a surprising meeting on Tuesday, so I went to the executive briefing, and it was very well received so far. So I've done that. So I presented it to that body, but then we've already scoped our child criminal exploitation, and we've had our first meeting, which went really well. And we've got them scheduled, and we're hoping to finish and have recommendations done by the 23rd of November. So we've gradually got everything in. The only people that we're having slight difficulty getting to a meeting is the police. So that's, yeah, I know, I was tempted, but no. So hopefully that will be sorted, but yeah, we're well on track with it. Thank you.
Mike?
Yes, there's a slide coming up. Have you got my slide? Okay, sorry, mine's got a green bar straight across. It looks different to that one. Oh, I can't read it anyway. It doesn't matter. Ah, yes, thank you very much. Right, it's not the one I got in front of me, that's fine. Right, due to the Queen's passing, we've had to reschedule the dates for our review, and you can see the dates that we've got on provisional for what we're taking on. Firstly, we intend to review the recommendations which came out of the Blue Badge review. I think it's really important that they've been implemented, as we all do. I have had an update from the Executive Director of People and from the AD to make sure that we can see where they are when we go to the review. Secondly, I'm finding the scope into review of adult safeguarding, and that'll be next week to go in front of the panel, and we tend to have that review finished by February next year. So we're going to, the panel's going to meet to discuss options for future reviews, but that's the direction of travel. And lastly, I just want to thank Mrs. Jill Birch for her SEND report, because I think that was excellent. Sorry, chairs on everything else. Questions on anything else, welcome.
That's fine. Can I just go back to Jill's report? Jill, the presentation, the layout of this is brilliant. And
Thank you.
I think, you know, to present a document like this is
Louise Connolly.
well done. Nice to read.
To say Louise Connolly helps a great deal, and she takes on board all the suggestions and the way we're doing things, and you know, she, you know, we tell her the words and she just makes it just look really good. So we were disappointed we couldn't put the schools, because I felt the schools need to be acknowledged, but they didn't want us to say which schools they were, so we have not, the pictures are pictures but no schools there.
Good. Thank you. And thanks for the updates. We now come to item 8A, which isn't on your papers, but you will have got an email today, this afternoon, and that tells us that Kirsty is going to be leaving us. On 20 years. After 20 years, on the 25th of November. But I think the way, and I'm sure all members will want to support me in this, is to say thank you for the way you've supported the Commission and the work, and certainly myself, the panel chairman, have all benefited and appreciated the effort that's gone into it. So, as I say, thank you. Mike, did you want to?
Can I just say something? I think we've changed. I mean, with your help, we've changed to be all these working parties and things. And certainly we're moving a lot more scrutiny and a lot more thing than we were before. And we just came together and looked at reports. And somebody gave us a report and we put our hand up. So I think you've made a huge difference to what can be achieved on behalf of all our residents. So thank you.
And make sure you minute these comments properly.
Thank you, Chair. Being the new boy on the team, only been on this for a little while. I'd just like to thank Kirsty for the work that she's done on the mayoral side, on the civic side, especially with recent events, and the work she put in there was exemplary.
Well, we've worked together a long time. I think all her 20 years. And I look much older, but she doesn't look a lot older. But I've got to say, I appreciate the way you've worked. Always very positive. And even today, you put yourself out tremendously to help me. And I think it goes without saying thank you. You know, I really appreciate it. So, yeah, we have known it. All that 20 years I've known you. So I think it's quite amazing. And I wish you well. But we're still here, so if you want to come back, that's no problem. Thank you very much, anyway.
Councillor Brossard.
Thank you very much. I can't claim to have had that length of service that Councillor Birch has had. I've only had 15 and a half years, but I can honestly say that the work that you provided, Kirsty, has really been exemplary. And what I would honestly say is that I think you'll be a very hard act to follow. You set a certain standard that I think whoever follows you will find it challenging. But with reluctance, I wish you very well in your new career. I just wish you'd stayed a bit longer. But I can understand why. It's an opportunity for you, and it's one that you had to take with both hands. But we all wish you very well.
Thank you, Kirsty. I think a little round of applause would be appreciated. Well, you'll be pleased to know I haven't got an 8B, only to say that the next scheduled meeting is the 3rd of November. So thank you for your attendance this evening.
And you can't even wish everyone a happy Christmas.
No, I can't. Thanks a lot, everybody. The meeting's closed.